All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. It is game day for Dallas, of course. So normally when it's game day, there's really not a lot of spicy news, not a lot of deep dives to get into, because of course the games are about to be played. But boy, oh boy, is today different. We got some very interesting stuff because a big report broke Saturday afternoon, evening time frame. But before we get into that, let's get things started with our stat of the day, as we always like to on this channel, our palate cleanser, if you will. And this was a post via the Sleeper Cowboys X account. They listed the Dallas Cowboys all-time passing leaders, Tony Romo with 34,183 yards in 156 games, Dak Prescott with 34,024 yards in 132 games, and then Troy Aikman with 32,942 yards in 165 games. There's a good chance Dak breaks the record this Sunday with 160 passing yards. Yeah, so I think when it comes to Dak Prescott, and I don't think anyone is saying he's better than Aikman, but there is a real debate between Prescott and Romo. And obviously, the raw numbers, barring something just shocking, will heavily favor Dak Prescott when they look at his career versus Romo's when it's all said and done. And you can look at postseason success. Obviously, Romo with very limited, Prescott up to this point very limited. We'll see how his career unfolds. But when you look in sort of the annals of Cowboys history, obviously it's Staubach, Aikman, depending on which way you're feeling. I'm personally a Staubach guy, but they're 1-2 in terms of the greatest quarterbacks in Cowboys history. People look at then the next tier. Is it the Danny Whites? Is it the Don Merediths? Is it the Romos? And where does Prescott fit into that mix? And I think when it's all said and done, I don't know if Prescott reaches to the level of a Meredith. I think Meredith to me is number 3. I think Danny White won a lot of football games and did a lot of great things, went to, of course, a bunch of NFC championship games. But I think a lot of that was on the tail end of the Staubach sort of dynasty that he was sort of leading the charge on. And Danny White was really good, don't get me wrong. But I just think he was sort of riding the coattails of what happened before him. You know, obviously with that late 70s Cowboys team that was very, very good in a bunch of different ways. I think Meredith, you know, on the come up, bringing up the Cowboys out of the expansion franchise that they were. You know, his issues with Landry, obviously Meredith had his, you know, foibles as a player, but he basically brought the Cowboys into relevancy before handing things off to Morton and then Staubach in the late 1960s. I think to me he's number 3. But then it becomes an interesting debate between 4, 5, and 6. And obviously Prescott's future still is unknown. We don't know what he'll do. He may leapfrog Meredith before it's all said and done. But I think it's a very interesting debate in terms of where do you put Prescott in terms of the all-time Cowboys quarterbacks. And certainly in short order, barring something very surprising, he will have every single volume statistic in terms of passing in Cowboys history. Now, a big part of that is the era, of course. We're in the most pass-happy part of NFL history for sure. It's not even close. Every single volume statistic is getting beaten over and over and over again. I remember, 15, 20 years ago, looking at Dan Marino with 420 touchdowns and 61,000 passing yards and saying, man, will anyone ever beat that? And now I think there's like 3 or 4 players, maybe 5 at this point that have surpassed it. So it's one of those things where the raw volume numbers that we thought could never be broken are being broken, it seems, every other year. And that's a big reason why Prescott will leap to the top of the Cowboys passing leaders. But I think when it's all said and done, and obviously Prescott's story isn't finished yet, there's going to be a serious discussion with Dak and where he ranks in terms of all-time Cowboys greats. And I think it'll be a fun one to have when it's all said and done because his story, just like with Romo's, is also one of the best. And that's one of my favorite things about the Cowboys quarterback history is that all the stories, with the exception of maybe Aikman's, just because he was kind of a golden boy top prospect, are kind of wild. Right? Meredith was the first quarterback getting beat up with those early Cowboys teams. Roger Staubach, Captain America, went to Vietnam, came back. Obviously had a service time in the Naval Academy after being Heisman Trophy winner there. Great story. Danny White, right, had to just sit behind Staubach for a long time before getting his opportunity. Tony Romo, undrafted free agent, held on to by Bill Parcells and Sean Payton, kind of on a whim. They just felt something was there. He became a great player. And Dak Prescott, 4th-round pick, led Mississippi State to their best years of their entire program's history. Great college story. Can't be an NFL quarterback. And we've seen what he's become. So I think there's a lot of great stories with the Cowboys quarterback history. And I think it's one of the great things about the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm excited to see what the future of Dax is. All right, let's get into the report that broke yesterday. And boy, oh boy, was it a good one, guys. So Kaiir Elam has been cut. Kaiir Elam has been waived by the Dallas Cowboys. The starting corner for the vast majority of the season is no longer with the Dallas Cowboys. Patrick No-See Walker had the original report. He wrote, Kaiir Elam has been waived by the Cowboys. Malik Davis has been signed to the active roster again from the practice squad. Patrick Walker, again, at Voice of the Star. Great follow if you're looking for someone to follow. Followed up by saying Kaiir Elam was acquired via trade this offseason and had a great training camp and was a starter in week 1. Shoddy isn't kidding around competition to the point he's convincing the Cowboys front office to move on from trades and top picks such as Mozzie Smith. I see. All right, so this is one of the more bonkers moves I've seen a team make in the middle of a season, I think, in recent NFL history. And I know it's Kaiir Elam, and I know he's not been great by any stretch of the imagination, but you don't see teams cut veterans in the middle of the season unless there's some huge flaw, like, they get arrested or something like that. And by no accounts, there's absolutely zero evidence that Elam, was doing anything wrong in terms of locker room or anything like that. This was strictly a performance roster management move. And again, Elam has started and played a ton of football for the Dallas Cowboys this season. And look, he hasn't been great at all. I'm not trying to say Elam was a good player. I think he was brought in to sort of be the stopgap. They had concerns about Diggs' injury. They had Revel, who was coming off injury. They had Butler, and then Carson was banged up. They just needed a veteran guy who had actually played corner before to play for the Cowboys while they had the injury situation at corner figure itself out. And he stepped in, and while he was far from perfect, of course, I think in some moments he did okay, right? When it's all said and done, not a great career with the Dallas Cowboys, obviously. I don't even know if he did maybe one pass breakup, no takeaways, a lot of big plays surrendered. So far from an elite career, but to have a veteran guy, even if he's benched, right? He played 0 snaps against the Raiders. To literally have a veteran guy just cut at this point in the season, the day before a game. Folks, I don't know if we've ever seen this before. When you talk about Shoddy and what he's doing with this team, and I'll talk more about the culture with this move later, this is sort of a youth movement extraordinaire. What have you done for me lately? Hyper competitive, ruthless organization. And it's just an absolutely bonkers thing to see, guys. I was almost at a loss for words. It's not that Kaiir Elam was, again, such a good player that, losing him is going to really hurt or anything like that. It was just the day before a game? Right? You're doing this kind of thing this late in the season after the bye. It's one thing if they would have done it post-bye. Hey, Revel's back. Hey, Carson's back. We just got too many corners. We're going to let you go, right? Then I could understand a little bit. The timing here, though, was hey, listen, we saw Revel play. We saw Carson play. We're good. We know what we like. We got Reddy Stewart, right? We got Bland. Heck, we'll even stick with Bridges, the 7th round pick who had a couple rough outings and backup duty. Plus, we have Diggs maybe coming back at some point, so we're good. Thank you, Kaiir, for your services. Boy, oh boy. You talk about a ruthless organization. Is this what it's like, guys, when you have a leader that's willing to make tough moves, the right moves he feels for his team? I tell you what, this is special stuff, and it sends a message to the rest of the team. By the way, you better believe Sam Williams, Kenneth Murray, Schoonmaker, right? They're sitting around what? What? You mean you can just cut underperforming veterans during the season? What? And listen, I'm not saying those guys are about to get cut, but I guarantee you they're looking around a little what's next for me? And it does send a message to the locker room. You put up or you shut up, right? You got to be a player for us this week, right? You've got to do well in practice this week. I don't care if we traded for you, right? Jaden Blue, again, the sort of undercurrent of here is that Jaden Blue is going to be another healthy scratch, right? Doesn't matter that you're from Texas. It doesn't matter that the fan base was excited about you and that the Cowboys are excited about your future. Did you have a good week in practice? Did you have a good weeks in practice? Did you play well in the game when you got the opportunities? Not as well as we liked? Well, you're just not going to play. And if we have to, we'll cut you. I tell you what, guys, this is a new era in the Dallas Cowboys for sure. Listen, I'm not saying this is going to impact the game at all going forward, and I don't think it will. Elam, at this point, he was benched against the Raiders, played 0 snaps, so a blowout victory against not a very good team. So that was sort of a little writing on the wall there. But to have a guy they traded for in the offseason, right? It's not like they signed him for nothing right before training camp, right? And they said, listen, let's see what you can do. It's not like he's an undrafted free agent or anything like that. It's a veteran guy they traded for in the offseason, and 10 games into the season, they're like, we're good. We're done. We'll cut you. You talk about working with the front office and setting the tone. Shawnee is taking complete control of this football team. People have said for years, for decades probably at this point, that this is Jerry's team. Jerry runs the show. The head coach is just a puppet. The front office does whatever Jerry Jones says. And I obviously felt that was at times a little overblown, but sometimes maybe valid. But we've seen a change in 2025, right? We just saw Lamb and Pickens get benched, going into a big Monday Night Football game. We saw Trayvon Diggs get benched. Now, I don't think Shoddy wanted to trade Micah Parsons, but in the end, he didn't reject it. And now we see this. I think it's time to say, guys, this isn't Jerry's team, at least exclusively, not anymore. It looks like now it's become, at least in part, Shoddy's team. All right, let's get into more news here. This is from DLLS Cowboys. Brian Schottenheimer mentioned that a pitch count will be in place again for Revel and Overshown again this week against Philadelphia. My least favorite two words in the English language when used together, pitch count. I don't get it. I've talked about it a lot. If they're healthy and can play and you like what they're doing, play them as much as they deserve to be played. It's one thing if you're like, listen, Revel's the backup, right? It's Carson, it's Bland, and it's Reddy Stewart, and we're rotating Revel in and getting reps and opportunities in the context of the game plan. That's fine. Same thing with Overshown. But listen, if you're healthy and can play, don't cap the snaps. If you're like, well, we want to watch and see how they're doing. I can understand if you have concerns maybe about conditioning or something to that effect. I almost understand if there was, little bumps and bruises coming out of the Raiders game. But why are you going into a game with a pitch count? That I don't understand, especially that it seems to be based on reporting a similar amount of snaps when it comes to Overshown and Revel, right? Revel, I think, got 19, Overshown with 31 against the Raiders. They seem to be indicating that they're going to be get a similar amount of snaps going forward, at least against Philadelphia. And listen, I understand you're trying to take a long-term approach, which the Cowboys obviously are this season. I just don't get it, right? Listen, maybe the first week. I even hated that. But I'm like, okay, let's make sure they get some confidence back. But can they not play more? Maybe this is gamesmanship a little bit, which could play a role too if you're the Philadelphia Eagles offense and you're trying to figure out, who you want to attack, who you want to go after. If you don't know how often Overshown's going to be on the field and in what circumstances, same thing with Revel, does it change your game plan focus? Does it add a little variability into the fold? That may be the case. This could be gamesmanship. I hope that's what it is. But if we go into more games after this and it's Overshown is getting, by design, only 30-ish snaps and Revel's only getting 20-ish snaps, nothing to do with game plans, nothing to do with personnel packages. It's just, listen, we're just tracking you to this number of snaps. Yeah, I don't really understand that. Maybe someone in the comments section has a different viewpoint, and you can sit there and say, well, you don't want to injure them, you don't want to rush them back too soon. I get that. I understand completely the concern. But then why play them at all? What's the difference? If you're a football player, and listen, I play college football, so I'm not like a pro guy, but I've been in some circumstances. There's no difference in my mind for these guys in the NFL. Again, I'm not an NFL guy, so I could be wrong. 100%, I'm willing to admit that. But I don't understand the difference between playing 20 or 40 or 30 or 40, right? Or 30 or 50. I don't understand what difference that does for a player in terms of the risk factor. Right. That's what I don't understand. It'd be different if you're like, listen, we're only going to do spot duty here or there or certain personnel packages, 10, 15 snaps. I could almost get that because that's such a small, isolated sample. You're trying to protect a player in certain circumstances. But to have them play half the game, and we're going to cap it at half the game, it just doesn't make sense to me. And maybe someone can talk some sense into me in the comment section. I just don't get it from a strategic perspective. Unless it's gamesmanship and you're trying to have Philly and other teams going forward, question who they're going to attack, who's going to be on the field. If that's the case, then it's a good move. Then it's a smart strategy just to insert some volatility into the opposition's game planning approach. But if it's literally just we want to track the snaps of players into their second game back, at a certain point, if they're healthy, let them play. That's kind of been my take. All right, this is from a post that I wrote, courtesy of my X account for this channel, SMI Cowboy Show. There's been some talk about how Shoddy needs a marquee win or something to that effect. This isn't college football. Marquee wins don't matter. Dave Campo had marquee wins. So did Phillips, Garrett, and McCarthy. The goal needs to be to build championship systems. I've been seeing some rumblings on social media and some conversations with different people and some different, Cowboys reporters and analysts and things of that ilk that have come out and said, listen, the Cowboys, they've done a lot of good things. Shoddy has stepped up in a lot of big ways in terms of this rebuilding year. Now they need that big marquee win. I'm not a big fan of that. Even in college football, I'm not a huge fan of it. At least I can understand it more. But listen, this isn't the college game where it's like, man, we just need that ranked win. We need to beat a top 5 opponent, or we need to beat a ranked opponent on the road, or whatever it may be, right? You hear all the time in terms of college narratives. It's not college sports, right? It's different. Everybody gets marquee wins, eventually, or gets pretty darn close to it. Campo had one. I think he beat the Titans in 2002, for example. Obviously, Parcells had some. Phillips had some, Garrett had some, McCarthy had some. You coach long enough, generally speaking, you'll get some level of marquee win. The reality is I want to see championship systems being built. That should be the priority. And now listen, I don't think Shoddy and his staff for 1 second care about marquee wins because they understand that's not the goal, right? Their entire process so far this year has been 100% building for the long term, setting the culture, finding the guys we want to put on the bus long term. That's been what they've been doing step one till now, right? Since January until now, that's been their process, right? We just saw that with the Kaiir Elam move back to, getting Shamar James on the field, changing up the defensive end personnel packages and who's starting, who's not, snap counts there, adding Clowney, cornerback rotations, safety rotations, right? Trade deadline moves, offensive personnel changes, things like that. Everything they have done since day one has been about who is going to be on the bus long term and who is not going to be in the context of the larger culture. So I think Shoddy and the staff and the Cowboys in general, they don't care about marquee wins. That's not their focus. They're on the systems approach, which I agree with 100%. But I understand the commentary out there. It's like they need one big win to make them feel better about themselves, to really feel good. It's like, I just don't think that's how it works in the NFL, right? All these teams are so good. The worst team in football, the Tennessee Titans, they have great players, right? The best team in football, which I think is the Los Angeles Rams right now, personally, they've got great players, right? We saw, what was it, I think in 2020, I think it was, when the Jets were playing the Rams, just to bring up the Rams. The Jets were terrible, the Rams were really good, and the Jets beat the Rams, right? And they were like 16, 17-point underdogs. It was a massive upset, right? Just because it's the NFL, right? And just because it's football. And what did that do for them? That was a marquee win for the Jets. What did that do for the Jets, right? 5 years later, here they are. So I'm not a big fan of this marquee win, this big win concept. I think it's all about getting better. It's finding the right players, implementing the right systems and processes. If you do that over the long term and just obviously continue to coach better and things like that, you'll build a good football team. I'm not a big believer. Now, winning is fun and winning is critical. You have to, of course, do it. But if you just hyper-focus on one game in one moment, eventually the wheels fall off. And I think that's what has happened with some teams. For example, the Miami Dolphins, they were hyper-focused on beating a good team. That was their whole mindset going back to 2023, right? In 2022, they kind of leapfrogged onto the stage as being a legit good team. But the second half of the season, they got some injuries and fell apart. And in 2023, they were good, same thing, great start. But they couldn't beat the good team. And they beat Dallas, I think, on Christmas Eve, of course, in Miami. And that was sort of the moment for the franchise. They were like, okay, we arrived. We beat a good team. Finally, late in the season, second half of the year, we beat a good team. That was the last hurdle to overcome. That's our marquee win. And since that moment, it's been a lot of bad for Miami, right? If you're focused on individual, games or weeks or moments in terms of your entire organization, eventually things fall apart because either you achieve that moment or you don't. But what happens next? You need to have the system in place. You need to have the process in place. That's what the Cowboys are building. I'm not a fan of marquee wins. I'm a fan of championship systems. And I think that's what the Cowboys are trying to implement. All right, this next report was courtesy of Jeff Cobb. It's a few days old, but I think it's sort of interesting to talk about. He wrote, kind of peculiar, the Cowboys choosing to practice outside in the rain today. The next 5 games will all be indoors, 4 at home and 1 in Detroit. Yeah, so anyone who's played golf or played football on turf understands that it is terrible for your joints, right? Anyone who's gone to the driving range where it's a turf driving range, that sucks. Right? Anyone who's played football on turf knows it sucks. So when I played college, I was an offensive lineman. There was a lot more of me back in the day. And the offensive linemen, where they practiced and did individual drills and that part of practice, that was on a grass part of the field. The turf is where the skill players were. That was our normal practice field, was the turf. And we'd come together for team periods and things like that on the turf. And I absolutely hated the turf. I thought it was a pain in the butt to deal with. It was one of those things where it just felt a lot of stress on your knees and ankles. It just wasn't comfortable at all. The grass always felt better. And that wasn't even great grass. It was just normal, standard, everyday grass, dirt, and mud, right? Nothing special about the grass we were practicing on, but it was better for, the joints and the ligaments and things like that. So taking a break from turf, I think, is really important. And listen, sometimes it's good to get outside and shake things up. I know a lot of people are like, well, don't you want to prepare for the dome and prepare for the turf? You don't have to ever really, in my mind, my experience, prepare for turf. You don't, because it's sort of such an artificial surface that it really doesn't matter. But I think it's more important to worry about your long-term health on the turf. Do you wear down your joints? Do you have some issues, especially if you're beat up late in the season? Getting a day on grass, even if it's out in the rain, not a bad idea. And I also like the idea of sort of shaking things up from a team perspective. If the team goes out there and says, all right, we're going to be out there. We've been in the dome the past couple days and it's raining again. And then the coaching staff says, all right, we're going to be outside practicing in the rain, right? It shakes things up, adds a little volatility. When you get this late in the season, at least from my experience, you get into a rut, right? You're just like, ugh, another day of practice, another meeting, another film session, another workout, another whatever. anything you can do as a coaching staff, even though these are pros and you would hope this doesn't creep in, the reality is they're human beings. Inertia sets in. We've all been there in our day-to-day jobs, right? It becomes a routine. It becomes a rut. You kind of, get stuck in the grind. Anything you can do to shake things up and add a little volatility, especially as you get late into the season and the schedule gets funky with Thanksgiving and the Thursday games and all of that, I think adding in something to help get these guys out of the rut isn't a bad idea. All right, this next report is courtesy of Brett Coleman, who's a big YouTuber for the NFL world and a really good follow on X if you're looking for someone to follow. He's not Cowboys focused at all. He's NFL focused. I think he's actually a Texans fan personally, but he's got a lot of good stuff. Anyway, he wrote, looking at running back pass pro stats, and this blew me away. Javonte Williams leads all running backs in pass blocking snaps this season at 72, and yet he's given up a grand total of 1 hurry. For comparison, Rico Dowdle has given up 10 pressures on just 35 pass pro snaps. And that's not picking on Rico Dowdle, right? I mean, Rico Dowdle obviously has had a nice season for Carolina. I think the Panthers kind of wasted a few games there when Chuba Hubbard was healthy, was back from injury, and they kind of split carries and gave Hubbard a lot of opportunities when Rico Dowdle obviously is a much, much better player and having a much better season. Obviously, he humiliated the Cowboys with a monster performance in Carolina. But I think it does speak to how good Williams has been as a pass protector for sure. 72 pass blocking snaps in 1 hurry. And listen, that's a good number. But if you actually watch him play, my goodness gracious, he is phenomenal. The broadcasters will commentate on it. The film, when you look at the All-22, he's good at it. I mean, he is a good pass blocker for sure, an underrated part of his game that he's added to the Dallas Cowboys. And I think it's one of the reasons also that Jaden Blue has struggled to see the field, because they look at what Williams is doing and Williams is providing and said, listen, we've got, if you look at the strength of this Cowboys team, not just the offense, but the team, it's their pass catchers, right? It is Lamb, it is Pickens. That is the strength. They've got 2 Pro Bowl guys at one position. Now you can make an argument defensive tackle is getting there, but in terms of continuity with the quarterback scheme and all of that, factor in Ferguson and Flournoy and potentially Turpin, the pass catchers are the strength of this team. So that means you need to be able to pass protect. And as a running back, if you can't pass protect, you're negating the strength of the team. And I think that's one of the many reasons why Jaden Blue hasn't been playing, because they don't like his pass protection. Hey, you can catch the ball in the backfield. Hey, that's great. We got a million guys that can catch the football, right? We got CeeDee Lamb, we got Turpin, we got Pickens, Ferguson, right? We got a bunch of guys that can catch the football, right? We're not hurting for pass catchers right now. It'd be different if it was just Lamb, right? Or it'd be different if, Ferguson hadn't had a nice year in terms of, being a good check down and red zone threat, and they were looking for another body in the middle of the field, right? It'd be different if maybe they didn't like Flournoy and his development, right? That would, maybe it'd be worthwhile in that case. But when you have this level of depth and this level of talent when it comes to their cadre of pass catchers, why do you need another one, right? And that's sort of the challenge that Shoddy and the Cowboys offensive staff, Clayton Adams and company, have put on Jaden Blue. It's like, listen, man, we don't care how good of a pass catcher you are. You got to pass protect, right? You got to do the little things. Can you convert 3rd and 1, right? Can you convert 3rd and 2? So that way we can get to 1st and 10 and throw it back to Lamb and Pickens and get some big plays. And that's, I think, where Jaden Blue has struggled. The inconsistencies and, of course, pass protection. Williams has been fantastic, right? It also goes back to the decision, and that's going to be in front of the Dallas Cowboys, which is what do you do with Javonte Williams this offseason? Kind of a lingering, undercurrent of a focus, right? Obviously, people talk about Pickens. People talk about the 2 first-round picks. People talk about what they're going to do defensively. Obviously, got some decisions to make with guys like Trayvon Diggs and Terrence Steele. But Williams is going to be a free agent. So what do you do with Williams here? I think it all depends on what he wants to do. I think Javonte Williams and his agent probably not stupid to understand that the Cowboys is a great fit for them. Very similar to Pickens, by the way, where it's like, listen, they've got a good home here. And I think Jerry Jones wouldn't mind paying a good price, but I don't think they can go in there and ask for the moon, because I think the Dallas Cowboys would not necessarily be against, assuming Williams wants a whole lot of money, allowing him to test the market. If some team wants to overpay, I think you'll let him, right? It's one of those things that sounds tough to do, but they did like Phil Maffa, and they still like Jaden Blue, right? And they'll probably go out and bring another veteran back. They may draft another running back, and while that wouldn't be ideal, if Williams wants to test the market and someone's willing to give him a lot of money, I think the Cowboys would be, more than happy to acquiesce. That being said, I want Williams back in Dallas. He's a great fit he in terms of his demeanor, in terms of the way he plays the game, pass blocking, running hard. He's been the best back in Dallas since Tony Pollard in 22. I think that's a fair assessment to make. The reality is it's going to be a tough decision and how much they're going to want to pay him and how much he's going to want to take. But he's been great. That's undeniable. But it does speak to, I think, a larger question at the running back position that's going around the National Football League. Because there are a lot of really talented backs. Bijan Robinson for Atlanta, for example, is outstanding. Jonathan Taylor is having an MVP caliber season, right? So it's been a great Saquon Barkley was phenomenal last year. But because of that position and because of the dollars with the salary cap and the issues with the injuries and longevity, is it worth giving a lot of capital to a running back, right? You look at the Raiders with Ashton Ginty and their flaws with their roster. They've got a good back. Ginty's a young player. But they used to top 10 pick on a running back, and there's nothing he can really do to help them because of their other issues. So it brings up a serious question. How much capital, draft or salary should you throw at the running back position? And at this point, I'm still leaning. I know Barkley and Derrick Henry were great last year and great additions, but those have been the exceptions, not the rule. I'm still leaning to, trying to go more the low-cost option, mid to late draft picks, veteran backs, right? I know that's not, in terms of a very sexy thought. And listen, I hope Javonte Williams takes a team-friendly deal to return. I really do. But if he doesn't, I think you got to let him go. There are other positions that are too much of a priority in order to have salary cap and draft capital available for than the running back position. All right. This next report these two posts are from me, actually. I'm going to circle back to the Kyrie Elam discussion here because I thought it's very interesting. So I had two posts on X right after the news broke that I thought was that jumped out to me. So the first one, I'll start at the bottom and work my way up. I said Kyrie Elam has the fourth most snaps played this year for Dallas' defense. He has more starts at DB, includes corners and safeties, more starts at DB this year than anybody except Deron Bland. So think about that for a second. Only Deron Bland has had more starts at corner or safety at that entire defensive backfield than Kyrie Elam, and he has the fourth most snaps of any defender. And Shawnee didn't care, and he cut him. And let me ask you this. I mean, this is a little before my time, but is this what it was like in the 90s with Jimmy Johnson? This level of accountability, this level of ruthlessness? Now, this is pretty ruthless, right? And listen, I'm not saying it's a bad by Shoddy by any means. I just thought it was absolutely crazy that, when do we see a guy who's played this much snaps? We see this happen when, hey, we're not going to bring you back in the offseason, or, you'll see a surprise training camp cut, or like a guy who played this level of snaps the prior season gets cut in training camp. Like that we see, relatively not super common, but it's not uncommon to have a guy with this much volume at this point in the season to get cut 10 games in. When do we see that? When have we ever seen that? And I know the Cowboys with the injuries at corner was sort of a special situation. They had two guys, Revel especially, but now Carson, young guys coming back from injury. They still have Butler ostensibly as well, right? So they kind of feel like they like the guys they have, and they've definitely been going more youth movement on defense, right? Shamar James gave a lot of opportunities to. Of course, Leofau still gets some opportunities. Ezra Raku, they named a starter, right? So they're definitely going very youth-oriented on defense. When they had the injuries at safety, they basically said, we don't want any veterans. We'll throw the undrafted free agent rookies out there and see how they do, which in a lot of cases didn't work out so well. But So I get all the context of that, but when you just look at it at face value, it is an absolutely it's a cold move. But I think it does speak to what Shoddy has done a really good job of in terms of managing the personal and the business. He can be the leader the team needs in terms of dealing with the Neyland tragedy and stabilizing the ship after the Parsons trade and all of that kind of stuff, and finding a way to coach the team successfully, dealing with massive injuries against the Jets and against Washington to come away with big wins in those situations. He can be that coach. But he can also be the guy making the brutally tough decisions in terms of you're cut. Okay, you're not on this team. Hey, listen, Keeman Hall, Troy Pride Jr., corners, all training camp. You battled hard. Yeah, you're gone. You weren't good enough. Hey, Jaden Blue, fan favorite, from Texas, of course. Everyone wants to see you play. Hey, you're not good enough. Hey, Mozzie Smith, right? Former first-round pick. Hey, are you doing some good things? Well, we're going to basically bench you and then trade you, right? For it's just kind of a sweetener throwing into the pot for the New York Jets, just to get them a player in return for the Quinn Williams deal, right? Hey, Tolbert, you've done a lot of good things, in terms of you led the team in receiving touchdowns last year, right? I know you, Shoddy knows you, right? Personally, we like Lamb, we like Pickens, and we like Flournoy better, we like Turpin. Right, we like a lot of other receivers that that are doing better things too. So I'd rather give Schoonmaker some catches and some opportunities. I'd rather give Brevin Spann-Ford some opportunities, right? And that's just what it's been with Shoddy. I mean, the ability for him to juggle the ruthlessness that he has shown. I mean, it's been brutally ruthless with the emotional leadership has been absolutely outstanding. I mean, I think it speaks to the clarity of purpose he leads the team with and the authenticity. Because if players see you as fake, right? Because you can be ruthless and cold, right? You can certainly be that, and you can be incredibly emotional and be that kind of leader that they have to be in some instances. But it's very hard to be both. And Shawnee's done a great job in both situations. But because he's so authentic and honest, and everyone basically commented on it when he was dealing with the Nealon thing and everything there, I just think it speaks to a unique leadership situation that Shawnee has. And I have no idea what he'll do long term with wins and losses, but boy, Brian Schottenheimer as the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys has certainly been the most interesting coach I've ever seen. Now, Jimmy Johnson was before my time, but I thought Bill Parcells, I mean, he was a disciplinarian, he was a turnaround artist, right? But, you kind of knew what he was, right? Wade Phillips was a figurehead, he was a great defensive coach, but, I mean, we all knew that. Jason Garrett was sort of a figurehead, try to be a culture guy, but we all know how that worked out. Mike McCarthy, kind of more, I don't want to say old schooler, but he was West Coast offense, work with Dak, kind of not an X's and O's, but a Jackson Joe's guy, right? Yeah, nothing. All those guys weren't very interesting. They didn't have any unique thoughts or strategies. In some case, with guys like McCarthy and Garrett, I felt like they were a little behind the times sometimes when it comes to the X's and O's. Shawnee came in and modernized the offense, so that was a check the box situation for sure that he's pretty much aced at this point. But how about the leadership that he's shown in some of these situations, and how about the willingness to make these brutally tough moves? I mean, when's the last time we've seen someone like this? And I know Bill Parcells made some tough moves, right? Obviously cut Quincy Carter after 2003, after he led him to the playoffs, right? There's been a lot of moves that Parcells made that were just really, really hard-nosed and tough and pretty cold. But I think Shoddy in 10 games may have beaten Parcells' actions in 4 seasons with the Dallas Cowboys. Is he up to the Jimmy Johnson level yet? I think maybe he's getting close. And I mean, it doesn't guarantee any wins or anything like that, but boy, oh boy, it is a sight to see. And my final point on this topic is Shawnee has turned the most country club team in football, because that was the vibe the Cowboys had under Garrett and McCarthy, the country club team, veteran team, right? You go there, not the hardest working bunch in the world, allegedly, right? I kind of disagree with that connotation. They're a very showman team, very all about the veterans. You treat the players right. If you've played here a little bit, you're going to get preference, all that kind of stuff. They turn the most country club football team in the world to the most ruthlessly competitive team in the world, and it's a sight to see, guys. It's a sight to see. All right, this last report here, I mean, it's kind of funny because I talked about it a couple days ago. So Tyler Guyton, there were a couple of Arizona Cardinal players after Guyton, right after the end of a play, basically pancaked a DB for Arizona, Will Johnson, put him on his back like 3 yards out of bounds, just humiliated him. Now, Will Johnson's a corner, Guyton's a tackle, so a little bit of a mismatch there, but a pretty impressive block from Guyton that I was a fan of. And then a reporter, I believe, with the Philadelphia Eagles responded to it. He said, I mean, it's Tyler Guyton. This is what he does. And he showed the play, and I got a screen grab of it there on the screen of Guyton when he used his left hand to basically knock out an Eagles defender in their Week 1 matchup. And then Patrick Walker, at Voice of the Star, he responded, and I agree with this 100%. If you're pissing off the opponents to the point they're bringing up something that's almost 3 months old from a game they won, you're doing your job, in my honest opinion. Piss them off some more this week, I say. Yeah, your goal as an offensive lineman should be an irritant. You should be the biggest, baddest dude on the block. You should make these defenders, these corners, these linebackers, these edge rushers, right, especially at a tackle, right, when these guys, it's a fun position for them. They get the sacks, they get the interceptions, the tackles for loss. The media knows their name, the crowd knows their name. They get the attention, the glitz and the glamour. If there's a glitz and glamour position on defense, it's these edge rushers, right? If you're Guyton, embarrass them, humiliate them, make them hate their lives. I love it. The nastiness and attitude of Guyton has been a sight to see. I am here for it 100%. That, to me, is the most important thing with Guyton, ironically. Just because the attitude, it really matters. You want to make teams hate playing you, right? Because it goes a little bit back to the country club mindset. I think no one hated playing Dallas over the past 3 or 4 years, except when they were good. Like, oh my goodness, how are we going to block Micah Parsons? Oh, CeeDee Lamb's tough to defend. Now teams are like, especially defenses, I don't want to play Dallas. They're going to hit you in the mouth. Right? It's a different mindset, and I love to see it. All right, let's get into the comments, guys. A lot of interesting comments to get to today. Roy5515, he commented on the video of the elementary school where in Camden, New Jersey, or close to Philadelphia, where the There were pictures of Cowboys players on punching bags, and they were letting the kids or teaching the kids or showing the kids to punch the faces of the Cowboys players. We're talking like elementary school stuff. Roy writes, the principal of the school should be fired. Aggressive behavior should not be taught or reinforced. Sportsmanship, respect your opponents, but beat them with your utmost effort should be taught. Kudos to you for calling this out. Yeah, 100%, right? I mean, these are elementary school kids. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing in that school? Beat You Up writes, great rants in this one. The marketing team for the Texans probably went to a school that punches pictures of grown men instead of punching calculators. Yeah, I commented on the fact that the Texans, they acquired former Cowboy linebacker Damone Clark off of waivers, and their marketing team showed a picture of Brian Flanoy, and I made a pretty big rant there. I'm not gonna lie, where I discussed how competence in an organization matters at every level, and if you let incompetence creep in at any level, it will take over your organization. The Houston Texans marketing team, while not the most important part of that organization, clearly has some incompetence, and it's a sign and a reason and an indicator why a Houston team that's normally very talented or has been certainly in stretches over the past 20 years or so has always underwhelmed. Because when you have incompetence in an organization and you allow it to exist, it spreads and it tears down your organization. NC Street News 6145 writes, we got the best defensive end in the draft, Donovan Ezeraku. He's an all-around defensive end. He's impactful in the run and pass. Him playing alongside Kenny Clark, Osa Quinn, and Clowney will help advance his progress way quicker than those other rookies too. Yeah, I agree. I think Ezeraku, I will say this, I like Jalen Walker, right? Outside linebacker, defensive end, edge player that the Atlanta Falcons got. I think it's between, not to be, probably get some negativity here. I think Jalen Walker over the entire season has played a little bit better than Ezeraku, although Ezeraku has been playing better as of late. That's for sure. But I like Jalen Walker. Listen, I think Abdul Carter has had flashes of really good play, and I think he's got a good future in front of him. But the reality is, a lot of the first-round defensive ends, some of it's injuries for sure, like Mykel Williams. But you look at Shamar Stewart, disappointing year for the Bengals for sure. They had high hopes for him. James Pierce Jr. for Atlanta's, I think a solid pass rush guy, but I think in terms of overall run and pass play, Ezeraku's been better. I mean, listen, the young Cowboys defensive end was a high production guy, was considered a steal when the Cowboys got him in the second round, and he's lived up to that for sure. Slow start to the year, right? Had a rough game against Philly, didn't do a whole lot against New York, but he started to figure it out. I think really emerging, my opinion, against the Packers with some plays, and it's just played better. Not perfect, but generally played better the rest of the way, and I'm excited to see what he does both today and the rest of the season. Cowboy Prestige 101 writes, this is why I'm okay with the rumors for the offseason of Dallas revisiting the Crosby trade talks. They will clear over $100 million in cap space next offseason with about 7 moves. If they can nab Crosby for even the earlier of the first-round picks, I'm more than okay with that. You could then slide back in the second half of the first-round picks and stack more picks depending on who is available. He also has a very team-friendly deal considering his position in production. Yeah, it's very interesting. The Crosby rumors are still sort of existing out in space. Obviously, there were reports, and I don't think they were unfounded, that the Cowboys had reached out to Crosby. But, obviously teams reach out to teams all the time. But the Cowboys had been reaching out to Quinnen Williams for a long time before they acquired him. So it'd be very interesting to see what happens with Crosby, who obviously is stuck in a tough situation with the Raiders. And Crosby's a great player. He's a phenomenal player. And the Cowboys, like you said, they can clear a lot of cap space with a bunch of obvious moves. They've got a lot of good pieces. The question is, what would the Raiders want for Crosby? They probably obviously at least number one pick. And what else? They probably want at least 2. The question is, would the Raiders take less? I mean, there's a lot of variables there, but I think if you could get Crosby, let me just throw this hypothetical out there, right? Obviously, if you could throw this year's number 1, the best first round pick, and next year's number 2, right? So obviously you have 2 number 1s and no number 2 this year, 1 number 1 and 1 number 2 next year. If you throw this year's 1 and next year's 2, and maybe a sweetener here or there for Crosby, I think you'd do it. I think you do that for sure. And then you trade out of the first round and pick up a couple second rounders or something like that and try and add a safety and maybe tackle a running back or something like that. And you go that direction. I think you do that. Now, will the Raiders take that? I don't think so. I think this Raiders organization, John Spytek, I think who's the GM there, I don't think he's an idiot. Crosby's such a good player. I think at this point they need something. And extra draft picks isn't helping the Raiders, right? They need a full-scale total rebuild from the roster. I think it's like I talked about the barbell approach yesterday. The Raiders have one side of the barbell pretty good with some of their veteran stars. I think they actually need more youth movement, or at least figure out their end is actually on the youthful side. Trading away the veteran stars and going all in on youth just creates a different problem for them. Whereas I think the Cowboys at this point still need a little bit of mix of both. So I think the Cowboys have a tough line to hoe here. I like the idea of getting another great player, but I don't want to go too aggressive with the veterans, right? It's a tough situation. I think the Cowboys are in a good spot now. I actually like using the 2 first-round picks they have this year, especially if they can trade back and get more capital, adding some young guys. Because they do have some expensive contracts. Clark, Quinnen Williams, of course, the Pickens deal will be lingering. And then, of course, we brought up the Javonte Williams question. So there are some things the Cowboys have on their plate. But I do think using those first-round picks, if they can get a star like Crosby on the relative cheap, obviously you take that. Delta 704 writes, Shoddy shows he actually cared for his players like a family over the past couple weeks in regards to the Nealon passing. That's how you build a championship team. You play for your brother a lot harder than you play for yourself or your colleagues. Great point there. And the fact that he's treating like family, I wonder if that helps soften the blow when he's ruthless, like making moves like with Kyrie Elam, right? Because he knows the players know they love him personally, and it's a family personally. Right, so it's nothing personal, and I think that probably helps the team in the locker room because they know, Shoddy has their back. Push comes to shove, and the really tough life things, but the business side is still the business. So I kind of wonder if doing both of those things kind of helps work together a little bit. We'll have to see, of course. All right, this next comment is from Emmett is the GOAT. I would wager that if you talk to most NFL coaches and ask for their best seasoned coaching men, the answers would surprise. Probably not the season with the most wins. Might get a story about a marginal player that the coach reached/taught. Men like Shoddy breed loyalty. As always, thank you for the channel. Like, hype, sub. Thank you for the comment and the nice words. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of nice words that you guys put in the comment section. It always means a lot to me. Yeah, you bring up a great point. I mean, you talk to or read anything about a coach. They always say, "What's your favorite team?" It's always a team that went like 7-9, or went like 8-8 or 9-7 or something like that at the NFL level. You'll talk to a college coach like, "What's your favorite team?" Year they went 7-6 or something. Like, why? Just because they overperformed, they were tough, they worked hard, they did all those things. It's one thing if you have a super talented team and you win a lot of games. You kind of just know as a coach, listen, we could roll out the footballs and beat most of our opponents. But when you're a scrappy bunch, a feisty bunch, and you buy into the program, that's a good thing for a coach. And I think you're onto something there where, the leader of men aspect is underrated, and getting people to buy in and rebuilding the culture. It goes back to what's the story with Bear Bryant, right? His first season at Texas A&M, the Junction Boys famously, right? Where that brutal camp in Junction, which I've been to Junction, by the way, just a sidebar way back. And he would have the ring of the alumni of that incredibly difficult training camp, and how he really liked that team. That team meant a lot to him. I think when they said he died, when Bear Bryant died, it was the only ring he had, despite all the championships at Bama, was with the Junction Boys ring. And I think again, it speaks to your point, right? It's those teams and those moments that really speak to coaches and also speak to the players too. Irving Crawley, 6854 writes, I've been listening to you over the last season. Thank you. I appreciate that. Trying to understand your comments on the Philly school system mentality. You said you lived in Baltimore and there must be a regional thing or mindset. Can you explain this comment a little more? I don't know how to take it. Yeah, it's just interesting. So obviously Baltimore and Philadelphia are different places. They're close geographically. But I remember when I was living in Baltimore, it was sort of a weird vibe where obviously Baltimore, certainly when I was there, maybe it's gotten better now. Where crime was a huge problem, drugs a huge problem, right? There was educational system was an absolute toilet. It was very expensive, corruption and sort of city government, local government, things like that. So it had a lot of flaws. The show The Wire had come out well before, but it's, the reason it was pretty popular is because it kind of nailed a lot of the things wrong with Baltimore on the head. And actually, I lived in the city, so I wasn't like a guy who lived around the city in the suburbs. I had a Baltimore City address. I lived in the city. And one of the things that was interesting to me is when one of the signs or bumper stickers you would see around was literally this: Baltimore. Actually, I love it, right? Like the notion was that everyone understands, even the people that live in Baltimore understood that the city was horrifically flawed in how it was governed and how living situation was for a lot of things. But the motto was like, actually, I love it. And to me, that struck me as odd, because I would think the motto should be Baltimore, let's clean it up. Baltimore, let's fix it. Baltimore, we're going to fix it, or whatever. Because it's a great American city historically. Same thing with Philadelphia, obviously. Right? A lot of history, it's a part of American culture going back centuries. right? Both Baltimore and Philadelphia. But I kind of feel like they've embraced, and you can see it with the Eagles fans, I feel like, in their mentality. They embrace the fact that they're flawed, that, with their crime and the expensive nature of things and all of their issues that I haven't seen in other places that I've lived. I mean, I've got family from California. I've got family lives in Houston. I've spent a lot of time in Florida. I live in South Carolina now. I've got family that lives in New England, right? I've traveled a lot in prior jobs for work, so I've been all over the country. And that part of the world right there, that Baltimore, Philadelphia, that's the only place I've seen in the country where when they have flaws, they're like, no, we're okay with that. We like our flaws. It's just weird to me. It's just one of those things. That's when I say it's a regional thing. It feels different. I haven't seen that in other places, and I'm not a fan of that. I think if you have a flaw within, listen, nowhere's perfect. But if you have a flaw, I think you should probably work to fix it, not champion it. And I think Philadelphia, and I think in some cases Baltimore, they like their flaws, and they make that their priority in some instances. And I don't think that's the best way to operate. Just my 2 cents. Hopefully that answered your question. Larry Brown 6340 writes, Cowboys should use the second number 1 to move down and collect more picks, then move out of the first round to a team wanting to get a quarterback, demanding that team give up a second this year or first round next year. I agree with that strategy 1,000%, Larry. I think that's the perfect approach because I think there's going to be a little bit of a run on quarterbacks. In fact, I would not hesitate giving up, depending on the haul you could get, potentially their best first rounder, right? If it's sitting at like 12 or 14 or something like that, which I think, 10, I think there could be a team that's like, a couple quarterbacks go, the team gets desperate. Hey, we need to move up. Okay, perfect. Give us your second this year and your first next year. Got it. And there you go. You take that, right? I think those are the kind of moves you can make. I really do. Because the 2 first-round picks, and I talked about this yesterday, they're not going to be immediate impact players. I mean, just realistically, right, in terms of the percentage chances and historical odds, right? They could become good players that could develop. But in that case, unless you have just the greatest immediate impact player of all time, and you luck into it, Micah Parsons, what he did his rookie year, no one saw coming, right? Obviously, he would not have been picked where he was by Dallas or by anybody if they had seen it coming. I think the Cowboys will look for a lot of opportunities to trade to get more capital if it makes sense, unless they have their preferred guy just fall into their lap, which might happen. But I do agree your strategy is the best one. Maria I9549 writes, all I need to know about Philly fans is a guy I went to high school with, said as a Redskins fan, he went to a game with his dad and grandmother. They were wearing Redskins gear and Philly fans threw hot dogs at them. They threw hot dogs at an old lady. A lot of such comments yesterday talking about Philadelphia fans, and not alone in those stories. And like I said, Philadelphia seems to encourage that behavior, which I don't get. Wormhole in cyberspace comments, oh yeah, the experts encourage Dallas to do dumb things on purpose. Then when they don't do what they say, they trash the Cowboys because they get great players. It's effing pathetic. It's one of those weird things where it is a self-fulfilling prophecy that the media has because it's a hot take game, right? Where they're like, the Cowboys should trade 5 number 1s to get Patrick Mahomes, making something up. And when they don't do it, they can sit there and say the Cowboys are stupid because they didn't do that, which is the game. I agree with you there. Andrew Campacos writes, you say Dak is good, not great. I think most fans would say he's great, not elite, or fringe elite. Imagine had Dak got drafted to the Chiefs with Andy Reid. I'm not saying Dak can do the same as Mahomes, but I can almost guarantee Dak would be considered elite. Dak's game has been required to change based on teammates and coaches, and he has stepped up every time. Yeah, I mean, listen, it's hard to compare hypotheticals just because you never know, right? I don't disagree. Maybe he would have been doing great things with the Chiefs had he been selected by Andy Reid and followed up Alex Smith just like Mahomes had. Sure, we just don't know. We can only go on what happened, right? It's hard to hypothesize what could have happened. It's fun to think about, but when making our assessments of how good or bad a player is or a team is or a coach is or whatever, you can only go on what actually happened, right? I think, it's fun to play the hypothetical game, but it gets you nowhere. Listen, I think you can argue where he slides, in terms of, I say good, not great, elite, French elite. I think it's, it's just word thinking at that point. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, well, are you elite? Are you good? Are you great? I just sort of categorize it that way. To me, when I look at elite, to me is all time, right? That's like Brady, Breeze, Manning, right? That's like transcendent. When I say great, I look at, a guy that I would not be surprised if he can carry a team to a win or against a good team by himself. And that's why I put Lamar Jackson in that category, and Mahomes in that category, Josh Allen in that category. I mean, we just saw Josh Allen. I know he lost to the Houston Texans on Thursday, But last Sunday, we saw Josh Allen account for 6 touchdowns and 40 some odd points against a good Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, right? And that to me, that's elite, right? Not that, that's it's just a difference maker right there. In terms of the good, very good, I think that's Prescott, right? And I think that's fair to say. I mean, is he transcendent? I don't think so. Is he Josh Allen? Is he Lamar Jackson? I don't think so. No, I don't think he's far behind. I don't think those guys embarrass Prescott, but I just think he's just not at that same level. When's the last time Dak, had accounted for 6 touchdowns against a good team? Right. And I'm not saying that's that's not an indictment of Prescott. I'm just saying it speaks to the greatness of Josh Allen in that instance. Right. And we know Prescott isn't transcendent. If you look at transcendence, there's been 2 Cowboys in their history that have been. That's Staubach and Aikman. Right. In terms of elite, the next tier, I would say none. Right. I would say, Meredith, Danny White, Romo, and Prescott have all been very good. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. You look at the 49ers, one of the great franchises ever with, their quarterback play. They've got 2 transcendents and a lot of okay after that. You look at the Packers, right? They had 2 transcendents, Favre and Aaron Rodgers. People are down on Jordan Love just because, he's good. But he's not, at least not right now, he's not Rodgers or Favre. But when you have that expectation, that standard, things can get skewed. And listen, I'm not trying to ding Dak. He's obviously outstanding, right? That's undeniable. But I just think there's a gap there. It's just my personal opinion. And I think arguing over, I think he's actually great, or I think he's actually elite, or I think he's not good, he's great, or he's not great, he's good. I do think we can get a little bit of a word thinking game there where it's just all about what word do you use, not in terms of how good is he, right? If you listen, I think to me, you look at transcendent. Are you an all-time quarterback? There's usually only 1 or 2, maybe 3 at a time in the National Football League. If you're lucky, there's the great, there's the special, right? I think that's like Josh Allen. I think that's Lamar Jackson. And then you got the very goods, and that's Prescott. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. PA Longhorn 421 writes, as my one experience, Eagles fans are easily the worst out there. Disrespectful, crude, loud, and not in a fan way. Before, during, and off season, I go to MetLife every year to watch Dallas, and they have great fans. I've heard that, by the way. I've interacted with some Giants fans, but I've heard the Giants fan base is the best by far, right? Obviously rivals and things like that, but you talk about just class act. I've heard that about Giants fans. Even during their Super Bowl days. Been to one Eagles game 3 years ago, and they're talking crap from long ago, hating like we're about to fight. And that's after he realized my green beanie was Dallas salute to service and not Eagles. From calm to violence, his friends calmed him down eventually. I've never been a smack talker. I go to lots of games every year. That video was hilarious because my cousin's wife is a teacher and is a pretty intense fan. I'm 3 hours from Philly, 3 hours from Pittsburgh, but being a Dallas fan, I'm hated by all. Believe it or not, though, there are plenty of Cowboys fans in our area, even though they're not saying it out loud. Always keep up the great content and topics. My first video of yours was Shamar James breakdown from 2 months ago and been watching since. Great stuff. Thank you for being a longtime viewer and commenter. And thank you for the insights. One of the things with the Cowboys fan base I think is very interesting is that, people, kind of mock the America's team stuff, but it is by far the most powerful fan base in sports because what they don't do is they're not like Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh, I hate to use this term, but they're very try-hard. And I don't mean that against the Steelers in a bad way, but they take it personally in terms of going on the road and making a lot of noise and waving the terrible towels. Like, to them, that's a part of their identity. They have to appear louder than they maybe are or more than they are. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great fan base, great organization, for sure. I'm not trying to hate on the Steelers fan base at all. But I do think it's just a little different. I think the Cowboys fan base is much more just large and expansive and more influential. That's why look at the ratings map and look at the TV map every single week, right? Because like you said, the Cowboys fans are everywhere. It is bonkers, right? You go to a Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, it's 1 million Cowboys fans. You go to a Rams game, you go to a 49ers game, you go to a Raiders game, you go to a Giants game, an Eagles game, like you mentioned, although maybe not so much going to Philly, right? It's just one of those things. They are everywhere. And they just, again, they're not loud and vocal about it like Pittsburgh fans are, which is great, right? It's part of their energy. It's part of their culture, which is phenomenal. Cowboys fans just have a different mindset. It's just sort of, listen, this is just who we are. We're just here. We are America's team. Like, we don't have to wave a terrible towel. We just know it. Right? We know we're the largest fan base. We know the most powerful brand in sports. We don't have to go out and try and sell the world on it because the brand sells itself. We sell ourselves, right? The Steelers have to sell the world. And again, I know that sounds like I'm picking on Pittsburgh, but honestly, I'm not. I think they're a great fan base. But for the Cowboys, it's just different. They don't have to do a sales job. We don't need a terrible towel. There doesn't need to be a little shtick. We just are the most powerful brand in sports. We're part of it. And I think that's exactly your point there, or at least that's what I read into it. But thank you for commenting. Thanks to all the commenters, as always. You guys do a great job, and that's my favorite part of every show, is reading and responding to your comments. Obviously, the Cowboys have their game against the Eagles this afternoon. It's going to be exciting to see how that all works out. Of course, could be witnessing potentially a little history, depending how Prescott plays and how the game goes. And I will be here tomorrow morning, of course, to talk through what happens and all the other Cowboys news. But until then, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.